A modestly dressed woman walks into a high-end car dealership, hoping to buy a car, but the sales staff judge her by her appearance and treat her with disrespect. Instead of assisting her, he mocks and has her escorted out, assuming she can't afford anything in their showroom. Guess what happens next? But before we begin the story, please do well to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below. Sandra Jones adjusted the strap of her modest purse as she entered the grand showroom of Sterling Elite Motors, a luxury car dealership known for catering to the city's wealthiest clients. The air smelled of polished leather and fresh wax, and the showroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Brand new luxury cars, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and Aston Martins, were lined up like prize trophies. Sandra wasn't flashy. She didn't wear designer clothes or expensive jewelry. Dressed in a simple blue dress and worn-out flats, she looked like an ordinary woman, not someone married to Alexander Jones, one of the wealthiest men in the city. And that was exactly how she liked it. She wasn't here to turn heads. She was here for something simple, a comfortable, reliable car as a surprise for her husband. Alexander always spoiled her, and she wanted to do something thoughtful in return. But as soon as she entered, she felt the eyes of the salesman on her. Not with admiration, but with judgment. A sharply dressed salesman, Todd, leaned against a sleek Mercedes-Benz, smirking as he whispered something to his colleague. The other man chuckled, shaking his head before turning away. Sandra ignored them and approached Todd with a warm smile. "Hi, I'd like to take a look at some of the cars." Todd barely glanced at her before sighing dramatically. "Ma'am, I don't think we have anything in your price range." Sandra blinked, caught off guard. "You don't even know what I can afford." Todd's smirk grew. "Oh, I do. I've been in this business long enough to spot window shoppers." He looked her up and down, his gaze stopping at her old flats. "We don't do test drives for people who aren't serious buyers." Sandra felt her cheeks heat up. She wasn't the type to flaunt wealth, but she wasn't used to being dismissed so quickly either. "I'm a serious buyer," she said calmly. "I'd like to see your selection of SUVs." Todd scoffed. "SUVs? Sure, but even our cheapest models start at six figures. Maybe you should try one of those used car lots down the street." Sandra's patience started wearing thin. "Are you refusing to show me a car?" Todd crossed his arms. "Look, lady, I don't want to waste your time or mine. I have real clients to attend to. Maybe come back when you can afford at least a down payment." Sandra clenched her jaw. She had been taught to treat everyone with respect, regardless of how they looked. It was clear Todd didn't live by the same principle. Before she could say another word, Todd snapped his fingers and a security guard appeared beside her. "Escort this lady out," Todd said dismissively. "We don't do charity here." The security guard hesitated, looking at Sandra, but Todd gave him a sharp nod. Feeling the stares of customers and staff, Sandra swallowed the lump in her throat and turned to leave. She wasn't about to cause a scene, but as she stepped out of the dealership and into the bright afternoon sun, one thought crossed her mind. Todd had no idea who he had just insulted, and tomorrow he was going to find out. That evening, Sandra sat across from her husband, Alexander Jones, in their breathtaking penthouse, the city skyline glowing behind them. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of Chicago's towering skyscrapers, and the soft hum of jazz music played in the background. Despite the elegance surrounding her, Sandra remained the same simple woman she had always been. She twirled her fork in her pasta, debating whether to tell Alexander about the humiliation she had faced earlier that day. Alexander, on the other hand, was the epitome of power and control. With sharp features, piercing blue eyes, and a presence that could command an entire boardroom with a single glance, he was a man who never let disrespect slide. He had built his empire from the ground up, and he valued loyalty and integrity above all else. Sensing her hesitation, Alexander set down his glass of wine and reached for her hand. "Sandra, what's on your mind?" She hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing serious. I just had a frustrating experience at a car dealership today." His brow furrowed. "What happened?" Sandra shrugged lightly. "I wanted to surprise you by buying a car on my own. Nothing too extravagant, just something comfortable. But the salesman took one look at me and decided I wasn't worth his time." She let out a small laugh, trying to downplay it. He even had security escort me out. Silence. Sandra glanced up and immediately regretted mentioning it. Alexander's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with something dangerous. Which dealership? His voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that preceded a storm. Sandra waved a hand dismissively. It's fine. I don't want to make a scene. People judge based on appearances all the time. Not when it comes to my wife, Alexander said, his tone sharp and unwavering. No one disrespects you and walks away unscathed. Sandra squeezed his hand. Alex, I don't want revenge. I just want to forget about it. He leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair, deep in thought. I understand, he said finally, but that doesn't mean there won't be consequences. Sandra knew that look in his eyes. The look that said the dealership had just made the biggest mistake of their existence. The next morning, they were going to learn exactly who Sandra Jones was. And it would be a lesson they would never forget. The next day, Sterling Elite Motors was as busy as ever. The showroom gleamed under the bright morning sun, and the scent of polished leather and new car interiors filled the air. Salesmen in sharp suits hovered around wealthy clients, eager to make another six-figure sale. Todd, the smug salesman who had humiliated Sandra, leaned against a sleek Porsche, chatting with a potential buyer. He laughed as he recounted yesterday's minor incident. Some broke lady walked in yesterday, thinking she could afford one of our cars. Can you believe that? He chuckled, shaking his head. I had to get security to walk her out. She was wasting my time. His client, a middle-aged businessman, smirked. Some people don't know their place. Just then, the sound of a powerful engine rumbled outside. A sleek, jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom, its exterior polished to perfection, pulled up in front of the dealership. The car alone was a statement. Old money, power, and status. The showroom went silent. Todd's smirk vanished as every employee straightened their ties, rushing to the entrance. The dealership manager, Mr. Hayes, practically sprinted to the door, his hands smoothing down his suit. Who is it? One of the salesmen whispered. Then, the back door of the Rolls-Royce opened. A man stepped out, tall, commanding, dressed in an expensive three-piece suit that fit him like it had been tailored by the gods themselves. His mere presence sent a wave of tension through the dealership. Alexander Jones. Todd's breath caught in his throat. The Alexander Jones. Billionaire. Business magnate. The man whose name was practically carved into the foundations of the city. And he did not look pleased. The moment he stepped inside, every pair of eyes was on him. The dealership manager immediately approached, his voice dripping with nervous enthusiasm. Mr. Jones, what an honor. Welcome to Sterling Elite Motors. How can we assist you today? Alexander ignored him. His sharp gaze swept the showroom until it landed on Sandra, who had just stepped inside behind him, looking as elegant as ever in her usual understated fashion. Sweetheart, he said smoothly, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Is this the man who disrespected you? Sandra's eyes flickered toward Todd. The once arrogant salesman had gone completely pale. Sandra hesitated. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also knew Alexander well enough to understand that silence wasn't an option. Finally, she nodded. Yes, that's him. The entire showroom fell into stunned silence. Todd opened his mouth, struggling to form words. And Mr. Jones, there must be a misunderstanding. Alexander turned to him, his piercing gaze cutting through him like a knife. A misunderstanding. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable edge to it. You took one look at my wife, assumed she didn't belong, and had her escorted out like a common criminal. Todd swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't know who she was. Alexander took a step closer, towering over him. And that's the problem. You judge her based on her appearance. You treated her like she was beneath you. Tell me, Todd. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Is this how you treat all customers who don't look rich enough for you? Todd stammered, his face turning red. No, sir. It was... Alexander wasn't finished. He turned to the dealership manager. We were considering purchasing a fleet of luxury cars from your dealership. 10, to be exact. The manager's face went ghost white. Mr. Jones, please, I. But, Alexander continued, if this is how your staff treats people, I'd rather take my business elsewhere. He turned to Sandra and held out his hand. Come, sweetheart. We'll buy from someone who values all their customers. Sandra smiled softly and took his hand, allowing him to lead her back to the Rolls-Royce. As they stepped outside, Todd and the entire dealership staff watched in complete horror as their biggest potential deal, worth millions, drove away. But the worst was yet to come, because when word spread about what happened, Sterling Elite Motors would never be the same again. By noon, Sterling Elite Motors was in chaos. The dealership manager, Mr. Hayes, paced his office, his phone buzzing nonstop. The scandal had spread like wildfire. Social media was ablaze with the story of how a simple woman was humiliated and kicked out, only for her billionaire husband to return in a Rolls-Royce the next day. The headline alone was enough to destroy their reputation. Customers who had been inside the showroom when it happened had already posted videos. Comments flooded in. Small Blue Diamond, disgusting behavior. I'll never buy from them. Small Blue Diamond, they only respect money, not people. Hope they go out of business. Small Blue Diamond, karma came faster than a Bugatti on this one. Todd sat stiffly in his chair, his face drenched in sweat. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the hate messages piling up on his personal page. His once confident smirk was gone, replaced with sheer panic. Mr. Hayes, he stammered. This is getting out of control. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. The manager slammed his hands on the desk. A mistake? You cost us the biggest deal of the year. Do you have any idea who Alexander Jones is? One phone call from him, and we could lose our biggest clients. Todd swallowed hard, his usual arrogance nowhere to be found. Maybe we can apologize? Apologize? Mr. Hayes scoffed. We are way past that, Todd. Just then, the receptionist rushed in, breathless. Sir, we have reporters outside. Mr. Hayes groaned and rubbed his temples. Of course we do. Fantastic. Todd's stomach dropped. What do we do? Mr. Hayes glared at him. We do damage control. And you're done here. Todd's face paled. You're firing me? You humiliated a billionaire's wife, got us trending for the wrong reasons, and destroyed our reputation in less than 24 hours, Mr. Hayes growled. What did you think was going to happen? Pack your things and get out. Todd tried to argue, but one glance at the manager's furious expression told him it was useless. As he left the office, head low, the same security guard who had escorted Sandra out the day before was now standing at the door, waiting to escort him out. Irony at its finest. Outside, cameras flashed, microphones were shoved toward him. Sir, are you the employee who humiliated Sandra Jones? Do you regret your actions? How does it feel to be fired? Todd kept his head down and pushed past the crowd, but there was no escaping the damage he had done. Meanwhile, across town, Sandra and Alexander were sitting in the lounge of a much smaller, family-owned dealership. The staff there had treated her with kindness and respect, not knowing or caring who she was married to. They simply treated her like a person, a lesson Sterling Elite Motors had learned far too late. Sandra smiled as the kind salesman handed her a fresh cup of coffee. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need public humiliation. She had respect, and that was worth more than anything money could buy. A week after the scandal rocked Sterling Elite Motors, the once prestigious dealership was barely hanging on. Sales had plummeted. Loyal customers had canceled orders. The once bustling showroom was now eerily quiet, with only a few hesitant visitors who left as soon as they recognized the name from the viral news. The manager, Mr. Hayes, sat in his office, his head in his hands. The dealership's reputation had taken a hit so severe that even desperate PR campaigns weren't enough to fix it. Every luxury car enthusiast in the city now associated Sterling Elite Motors with arrogance, discrimination, and stupidity. Meanwhile, Todd had faded into obscurity. No other dealership would hire him after what happened. His social media was bombarded with hate, and he had even deleted his accounts to escape the public backlash. Across town, Sandra was living her best life. She sat on the balcony of her penthouse, sipping her morning tea as she admired the view. The soft breeze played with her hair, and for the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. Alexander stepped out to join her, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small envelope. Curious, Sandra opened it. Inside was a set of car keys. But not just any car keys. These were for a brand new luxury SUV, the exact one she had been interested in. Her eyes widened. "Alex, you didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted with a smirk. "But I wanted to. And before you ask, no, I didn't buy it from them." He chuckled. "I bought it from that family-owned dealership where they treated you like a queen." Sandra laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." He leaned back, his expression growing serious. "You know, this wasn't just about a car. This was about respect. Too many people judge others by their appearance, forgetting that true worth isn't measured by clothes, brands, or flashy status symbols." That salesman learned that the hard way. Sandra smiled, "And I hope he never forgets it." As she held the keys in her hand, she realized something important. True wealth isn't about money. It's about kindness, respect, and the people who stand by your side when it matters most. And at that moment, Sandra Jones knew she was the richest woman in the world.